Well, he came out of the darkness. How was I supposed to know who he was?
You remember the clown sightings thing?
What?
The clowns, like the killer creepy ones. It was back in like 2016. It was all over Twitter and Vine and stuff.
Oh, yeah, I was in high school. People were freaking out about that. I remember people were like hunting them and stuff.
Yeah, it was literally the craziest thing to happen in 2016.
I agree. It was easily the craziest thing to happen in 2016. On a totally unrelated note, let's talk about Paranoia Agent. Well, it looks like we finally circled back to Satoshi Kon. I told you I'd come back to his work, and why wouldn't I? Satoshi Kon is absolutely loved among weebs across the globe, with his creations being born from a concoction of different genres and tones. Distinctly Kon, almost to a fault. I haven't been able to watch Paprika or Perfect Blue yet, but it's crazy to see these shot-for-shot comparisons with the likes of Inception and Black Swan. Definitely gonna have to look into these more at a later date. I already talked about Tokyo Godfathers on this channel and the rabbit hole of influences that took me down.
Not today, Satan. Not today.
Since that video, my focus has been set on one of his more bizarre projects, the only TV show that he ever made. We are not counting that JoJo Bizarre Adventure OVA that was only a few episodes. Also, OVAs are different from normal broadcasts because, you know, they usually never air on TV.
Iggy, get out of here! He's still alive!
Paranoia Agent was all Kon's influence and was televised, and after watching it, I gotta say it is quite the showstopper for only being a one and done. Like, after finishing it, all that's left to say is, wow. Paranoia Agent, released in 2004, was born from the desire to act upon Kon's drafted ideas. With movies, you tend to have more of a centralized idea for what is gonna happen. Experimentation can occur, but you kinda know what you're gonna get from the start. Kon tried to combat this with his unique approach to storytelling by letting the base of the story naturally progress with what happens next, but even then, ideas get left behind. Time limitations and budget will do that for you. With TV, however, things can vary from episode to episode. You could be following the main cast and then boom, a side story about 3 random people trying to off themselves, which does happen in this show. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Production was given to Madhouse yet again, who helmed his previous 3 films, the aforementioned Perfect Blue and Tokyo Godfathers and Millennium Actress. They have also drawn for a bunch of other anime, but God help us all if I start talking about Death Note.
I'll take a potato chip and eat it.
These films built the basis of the mountain of ideas he had, unused parts that culminated in Paranoia Agent. So, what is Paranoia Agent? Depending on who you ask, some people will tell you it's one of those artsy shows that can derive all sorts of meaning from watch to watch. Lots of rumors have been spread about its messaging. Before watching it, I heard it was a commentary on being in the in-group. I also heard it's pandering to the critiques of consumerism. Some say it's not good, some say it's Kon's best work. Personally, I heard Paranoia Agent killed a man who found out it was nephew to von Hindenburg and second cousin to the devil.
Is that a Great Gatsby quote?
Perchance. Anyway, I felt compelled to talk about this today because of its modern relevance. To say misinformation is on the rise would be an understatement. Granted, this message is timeless, but its vehicle is new. However, Kon has always been fascinated by that reaction to it, rather than the mode in which it was delivered. Spoilers ahead, but Paranoia Agent is a show about the dangers of shows. It's a critique on its own medium, its own culture, its own people. Paranoia Agent is about the societal pressures of the individual and the culture of victimhood. Paranoia Agent has somewhat of a shotgun approach to its storytelling. Satoshi Kon referred to this as the relay method, but basically all that means is that different characters each episode take control of the spotlight with their own issues. At the end, a single solution is found. There isn't necessarily a main character, only repeating actors in the play. The overall plot of Paranoia Agent centers around a string of violent crimes caused by Shonen Bat called Little Slugger in the excellent Funimation dub, a troublemaking kid with a golden baseball bat that rides on roller skates and hits people. Absurd, but I expect nothing less from this legendary creator. Each episode usually follows the future victim of Shonen Bat. At first, it seems like his victims are completely random. A kid who believes he is being bullied at school, an adult worker who is living a double life, a young girl who changed her dad's desktop photos. The narrative thread that ties these episodes together, other than Shonen Bat, are the detective characters, Maniwa and Akari. These guys are investigating the violent acts, and while these aren't the main characters, they act as a grounding mechanism for the audience. Again, these cases are absurd. As for the focal characters of each episode, we get to see their day-to-day activities, their struggles, their situation, and ultimately their reality. At this point, the animation takes center stage, as Kon and Madhouse get to play with different art styles and storytelling methods that fit the arc of each character. I mentioned that kid who starts to get bullied. His paranoia leads to a world that is more fluid-looking, melting on the screen akin to a nightmare that a child would have. Another example that I really love, which is a spoiler so maybe skip ahead a bit, is with Akari, who is struggling with the modern ways of Japan. His reality shifts to the Japan of the past, using the look of older Japanese art. And I can't 100% confirm this, but I swear this is also referencing the animation style of some of the earliest surviving examples of Japanese animation. It fits thematically, but I can't confirm for sure. The story starts with a woman named Tsukiko, a character designer for the incredibly popular Moromi, a parody of Sanrio characters like Hello Kitty. You get to see it talk and speak and move throughout the series, and I won't get into how or even why that is possible, but it is noteworthy to bring up because of how cool its motions are. It's a plushie and the weight reflected in its movements can be observed. It's a great detail. You'd think being the creator of such a popular icon would be awesome, but that's not really the case here. Tsukiko is not in a great place. Constant pressure from her colleagues, her boss, and even herself create a toxic work environment. Moments bleed into each other and it feels she's one bad thing away from crashing out. On her way home, she has an overwhelming sense of paranoia, and can you really blame her? This sense of dread leads her to run away, and after stopping to collect her things, she gets hit in the head. This leads her to be questioned at the hospital by the detectives, and eventually a reporter looking for a new story. At this point, there is some doubt as to whether Tsukiko is lying about her accident. Does Shonen Bat even exist? Well, after the reporter becomes the second victim, it seems all too clear that there is something going on. This directly leads into episode 2 and the next victim, a kid who looks similar to Shonen Bat named Yuichi.
Mr. Yukichi.
The kid thinks he's hot shit, and from the incidents in episode 1, the world has now adopted a much different view on him. There is now a growing idea that Yuichi
Mr. Yukichi?
is Shonen Bat. He gets bullied, some of it being real and some of it being delusions around another kid named Shogo, a kind transfer student. Yuichi
Mr. Yukichi
doesn't really have many outlets to go to for help, all except his mother and his tutor/adult crush, Harumi. But even then, we find that generational disconnect, with only Shogo wanting to reach out. After Shogo gets hit walking home with Yuichi,
Mr. Yukichi. Mr. Yukichi. Mr. Yukichi. Mr. Yukichi. Mr. Yukichi.
the once popular kid believes himself as suspect number 1. This clouds his mind and eventually brings Shonen Bat right to him. That tutor I just mentioned, Harumi, well, she's not just a tutor. She's living a double life, and episode 3 deals with yada yada yada.
Yada yada yada, I never heard from him again.
You can see how in practice how this shotgun approach and daisy chaining of stories acts as a way to move from act to act. I think it works effectively here, as not only does it keep the pace from dragging, but it allows Kon to build upon the show's themes. We spend just enough time with these characters to get a sense of their world and problems, but not too long to the point where we get tired of them. There's a snowball effect being displayed here, bouncing from character to character, and it gets more and more absurd as the show goes on. Consequences of one episode bleed into the next and cause issues for those people around them. Like I just said, Yuichi wouldn't have had to deal with this if it wasn't for the Shonen Bat case starting. And without spoiling it, details seem to build as well from each case. Shonen Bat starts to smile at the victims all of a sudden, even though with previous victims he wasn't doing that. Yuichi smiled quite a bit, which kinda makes you think, was he a kid? Was he murdering people? Things tend to morph, and I encourage you to pay attention to these details if you are planning to watch this show. It was a really fun aspect for me on first watch. You're playing along with these detectives and people to try and figure out what is really happening.
It's kinda like a game of telephone.
I think that's a pretty accurate way of putting it. We don't know what the first message was, we can only go off of what the person next to us said, and that determines what we say to the next person. But unlike a game of telephone, we see very real consequences in this show.
Yeah, like, things aren't so simple. They're not linear. Sometimes not even anonymous. Like, if you make one mistake, then there's like a lot of baggage that comes from that, and, you know, wow. I remember one time in school...
Do you think this is a good time to vent? I think...
No, this will only take a second. Anyways, Danny Fonatucci was this kid, and he always had to be the center of attention.
Okay, I think we're gonna take a break. Don't go anywhere. So yeah, I would say overall that I really enjoyed the show. It provides absurdist humor to weave a dark and really thought-provoking message. If you can make me laugh and think, then that's all I can ask for. Paranoia Agent is all but dull, and I think you guys would get a kick out of it too if you haven't seen it already. But I want to take this time to examine the message within the absurdity. I think it is easy for us to glance over any messaging in works like Paranoia Agent because we tend to get caught up with the details that are, frankly, outlandish. And in a way, I think that is kind of the point. There's a really great episode later in the show that exemplifies what I'm trying to say. In episode 9, titled ETC, we witness 4 housewives gossiping about Shonen Bat outside their apartment complexes. The entire plot revolves around them sharing stories about the mythic figure, and each story tries to outdo the last. It gets more and more absurd, and to us, the omniscient viewer who has built up an understanding of what really is going on, it provides a nice laugh to see what these ladies come up with. Etc, etc. Hey, that's the episode name! Well, none of this actually happened, but hell, does it make for a good time. One of the more interesting things to note about each story is that while all of them are fake, there's one common thread about them. Shonen Bat comes in during an uncomfortable situation. Whether that is a student struggling during a math exam or a rocket exploding, Shonen Bat appears. It's almost as if Shonen Bat is a deus ex machina in each story. Or more appropriately, given the context of all of Paranoia Agent, Shonen Bat is a scapegoat. The word scapegoat originated from Jewish practices. It meant to cast a person's sins on another, literally doing so through the means of a goat that they would send away. All wrongdoings forgiven because the goat took them. It's gone, no harm, no foul. And it would be so much easier if life worked like this, right? All the shitty and uncomfortable stuff in the world is because of X thing. It's because of insert thing here. It's the fault of God. It's because of Shonen Bat. Shonen Bat can save me from my troubles. It's not my fault, it's theirs.
I didn't do fucking shit!
If you made it to this point, I assume you don't care about spoilers, so I'm gonna give you the big reveal. Okay, good. Shonen Bat doesn't exist.
Gotcha!
He was made up by that girl at the beginning of the show, Tsukiko. When she was little, she had a dog named Moromi. She was walking her dog and one day got distracted and the dog ran away. It sadly was hit by a car, and struggling with the guilt, she blamed it on an assailant, a person named Shonen Bat. This was a singular incident though, and was something that should have been left behind a long time ago. But once this occurred again at the show's start, it was picked up by the press. This carried the story throughout the city, and wouldn't you know, it ballooned into a huge fictitious problem with real consequences. Have you ever heard of the Kuchisaki Onna? I don't blame you if you haven't, unless you play Shin Megami Tensei or Japanese or no mythology or something along those lines. It's a yokai of sorts, a monster that resembles a woman wearing a mask on her mouth. She would approach kids walking home from school and ask 2 questions. The first would be, "Am I pretty?" If you say no, she kills you. If you say yes, she takes off her mask, revealing a horrifying slit mouth, and asks the same question as before. If you say no, you die, but if you still say yes, she gives you a mouth just like hers. Fun, right? Well, what does this have to do with Paranoia Agent? A lot, actually. In fact, there's evidence to suggest that this inspired Shonen Bat. Not the literal myth, but rather what it resulted in. With a story like this, you think it would originate at some point hundreds of years ago, right? Well, while that could be the case, the record shows as of now that it was started by a Japanese tabloid in the 1970s. It was local to the Gifu prefecture but later spread nationwide. Children were scared, and I don't mean scared of going to bed, I mean going home accompanied by parents or traveling home in groups. It caused a scare all over something that truly didn't exist and was spread to get people reading. I'm sure it wasn't the intention of the newspaper, but the consequences are pretty damning, and someone who would have remembered this would be Satoshi Kon, who was in his teens. What I find most interesting about the story is that it perpetuates itself through the lives of these kids. Walking home late at night from school can be a new and developing experience. You can see some things that maybe kids shouldn't be seeing or maybe haven't seen before. That can be scary, the new can be scary, and that allows for these kinds of rumors to be spread. Something unknown, something new, allows for rumors. Rumors can lead to scapegoating, it's a natural response, and thus lies the true nature of paranoia. There's a world a lot like ours that believes in a figure called Shonen Bat, a person that would make victims of the population and solve problems. A person wielding a baseball bat and riding on skates that wax troubled people in the head. All your problems gone with a simple act of violence. And all you can do is smile and say everything's fine. Is it fine? Is it really fine? Or is it so far from fine that nothing can be done and is a coping mechanism for acceptance? Kon has made it abundantly clear that Paranoia Agent, or really any of his works, aren't a commentary on society. Rather, it is an examination of how individuals react to their societal conditions.
人が見たい世の中っていうのはその人が持ってる幻想なり妄想を通した世界だと思うし、そういう意味では何かその病的な意味だけとは限らないと思う。
Paranoia Agent is no exception. It paints Shonen Bat as a force of nature, something that can't be helped. You are put in such an uncomfortable situation that he just springs to life. It's almost like he's real, but he isn't. We conjured him up. That kid who didn't want to go to school? Shonen Bat. A night worker who was failing to hide her other half? Shonen Bat. A girl who realized her ideal father is actually a terrible human being? Shonen Bat. One of the innate responses to societal failing is Shonen Bat. Shonen Bat leads to victimhood. Understanding victimhood isn't the denial of others' faults, because yeah, there are shitty people and societal factors at play. Victimhood is understanding your faults and accepting that and ultimately trying to learn from it. It feels nice to be the victim sometimes, and you really can't control that feeling. It provides comfort in the sense that it generates sympathy and you have an excuse. It is a natural response to feel good from this given the world we live in, and Paranoia Agent isn't telling you that it's wrong. In our world, the fault of the misfortune is put on the individual who is affected. Everyone else removes themselves from that narrative because that would be an uncomfortable conversation that would never happen as a society. So what else is there to do but generate a scapegoat? That's why the opening of each episode is so poignant. Each of the characters are just laughing in dangerous and off-putting situations. It's complete denial of their situation. All they can do is lie. And in scenarios so hopeless, can you really blame them? I'm gonna be abundantly clear. There are real victims in this world, and sadly really heinous aggressors at fault. Everything isn't a lie. What we talked about here today is a statement about pressure and how it can lead to falsehoods. For such a silly show, it is quite a dark conclusion. There isn't really an answer given. In fact, the opposite is shown. The last scene is a recreation of how the show started. Some things are different, sure, but overall, a new cycle begins. It's natural, unchanging, something that we can only hope to accept and maybe, just maybe, learn from.
You know that was pretty rude, right?
What?
Like, I was trying to share a story and you just cut to commercial like that.
Oh, well,
Dude, I'm trying to be more open and, like, share stuff, you know, contribute to your little show. I'd appreciate it if you treated me with a little respect.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, you should be. Apology accepted. I think you forget sometimes there's a human behind this screen. This dude thinks, therefore I is.
I had a pretty good conclusion, so I feel like I'm just gonna end it here.
Bitch.